Look, I've been mentioning last night and tonight the things government won't tell us, which can only lead, and rightly so, to a complete erosion of public confidence in those we have elected. The one story we're not being told is what damage has been done and is being done by the fear-mongering of political leaders whose first instinct seems to be to frighten us. The second instinct is to exercise complete control over us via shutdowns or lockdowns. Call them what you will. Listen to the experts, we're told, but they only listen to the ones which suit them. They don't listen to Professor David Katz, the founding director of the Yale University Prevention Research Centre. He warned us months ago, not 2 weeks ago, but politicians are too arrogant to listen. He said, and I quote, "I'm deeply concerned the social, economic and public health consequences of this near total meltdown of normal life will be long-lasting and calamitous, possibly graver than the direct toll of the virus itself." He said the unemployment, impoverishment and despair likely to result will be public health scourges of the first order. Presumably someone of distinction from the Yale University is not worth consideration. But this is where we are, make no mistake. As Dr. Sukarit Bhakti, a microbiologist and infectious disease epidemiologist, formerly of Mainz University in Germany, has said, and I quote, "All these measures are leading to self-destruction and collective suicide based on nothing but a spook." Well, it's true. If you have, as Australia has, 74 people in hospital and 18 in intensive care, how the hell is this a pandemic? Goldman Sachs, the global investment banking outfit, said when the case numbers in Melbourne came in on Monday that the decision to lock down Melbourne again was likely to be less successful than the first because adherence to restrictions would be weaker. They said, quote, "As residents' frustration builds, especially given Australia's very low levels of COVID-19 related hospitalisation and deaths," but they noted that this, what they called significant hit to Australia, has increased the probability that the federal government will extend its JobKeeper and JobSeeker stimulus, adding to Commonwealth Bank forecasts of job losses. Now, the Federal Treasurer is now saying that real unemployment is almost double the official figure of 7.1%. Now, if the government admits to that, yeah, I've been in government, you can bet the position's even worse. Goodness knows what the June unemployment figures will say. That's on Thursday. But as for business, Melbourne hoteliers reportedly lost more than 67% of their revenues per room during June. Occupancy is down 53.4% on the previous year, and yet Melbourne has more hotel accommodation being built than in any other Australian capital city. And there's talk that the developers of these so-called hotels will be forced to put the sites to different uses or sell them. How do you digest the fact that Australia's top 20 lenders have approved a combined $266 billion of repayment deferrals, 10% of all their loans, and they've extended the 6-month loan deferral program by another 4 months. It's called kicking the can down the road. Remember, the $266 billion eventually has to be repaid, and it's deferred, so business will have to meet its monthly commitment and then pay back what's been deferred. Perhaps only someone as smart as Adam Creighton can tell us how that will happen. And Adam, as always at this time, joins us. Adam, good evening to you, but the government don't want to tell us the facts on all of this, do they?
No, look, it's very sad. Look, I can understand back in March the terror, but look, we've had 5 or 6 months of data now, and the government's still running around telling people that this is an extremely lethal virus and they should stay inside. I mean, the effects on confidence of that are just extraordinary. And now, of course, there's this discussion about masks, the compulsory wearing of masks. I mean, of course, that would also scare people greatly too. I mean, the reality is this disease is far, far less dangerous than was first thought. But ministers are not saying that. And also the media too, as you point out. I mean, it's done a terrible job, by and large, of not reporting deaths and cases in context. And quite rightly, that's just scared the daylights out of people.
Yes, I mean, I mentioned those Melbourne hotel figures. Hoteliers losing more than 67% of their revenues during June. This is not sustainable, Adam.
No, look, it's certainly not. And these kind of arbitrary figures, plucked out of the air about how many people can be in hotels, can be in restaurants and cafes and so forth. I mean, this is just obviously a product of bureaucracy. I mean, it's got no business sense at all. There's no science behind it whatsoever. It's just all about the appearance of doing something. Governments need to be seen now to be doing something all the time. And I think that this is a disaster, actually. I mean, we have to learn from looking around the world and from looking at Victoria in particular that, governments don't fully control the progress of this virus. It's a natural phenomenon, and the idea that government can flick a switch and either have the virus or not, or control its spread, I think is extremely naive.
See, Adam, one thing to remember, and our viewers most probably don't think of this, although I'm sure in quieter moments they do, hardly any of these people making these decisions have ever given up one single cent. They don't employ anyone. They've never filled out a payroll tax slip. And they're telling business how to do business, and those who are after a job, they don't seem to understand the risk to their livelihood.
Now, look, that's exactly right. That is one of the biggest problems we've seen here. I mean, the people making the decisions don't actually incur any pain. Indeed, you could be cynical and say they actually benefit because, you see falls in asset prices. And so if you have a stable, $400,000 a year public sector income, then you can swoop in and, basically buy the second house. And of course, for many public servants, lockdowns mean actually doing less work. You don't even have to go to work. So it's quite a comfortable existence for many of the people who are making the decisions. I mean, let's just recall the Chief Medical Officer of Queensland. I think her name's Jeanette Young. She even said extraordinarily that the only reason Queensland schools were shut down for many weeks was because of messaging. So, millions of people were inconvenienced for no scientific reason whatsoever.
That's right. What Adam means there is messaging. That is, by closing, not letting kids back to school, we're sending a message. We really think they should be at school. We're just sending a message that this is a really serious issue. I mean, Innes Willocks, who heads that industry group, has said putting up artificial barriers, closing borders and turning Australians against each other is not going to get us there. Our responses to the health situation must be proportionate and logical, not hysterical and irrational. I mean,
sadly, they've been the latter. They've certainly been the latter. I mean, just have a look at Europe. We learnt just a couple of hours ago, in fact, that the GDP of the UK, one of the biggest economies in the world, it fell 25% in April from March. That's the biggest contraction since 1706. And economists were hoping that it might bounce back in May. Well, it didn't. It basically increased 1%. So, this is the most extraordinary destruction of economic activity there, that the likes of which the UK hasn't seen in over 300 years. And the death rates are basically the same as Sweden, which never had a lockdown at all.
Correct.
So it's just extraordinary.
Correct. And then you've got this schizophrenia. Now, there's been a brawl in the New South Wales government between Berejiklian and the Treasurer Perrottet. I mean, Gladys Berejiklian is talking about further cuts and these lockdowns. I mean, she's talking about pubs, and are these pubs in Tamworth and Wagga and everywhere facing the same fate? Dominic Perrottet, the Treasurer, says they'll prioritise economic recovery over preemptive lockdowns. Who do we listen to?
Well, let's hope we listen to the Treasurer on this one. I really hope he wins out. I mean, the idea of a 6-week lockdown in the biggest state, I think, would be just absolutely devastating for this country. And as the evidence increasingly shows, we have very little indication it would actually work anyway. Yeah. So, you end up with all the damage with very little potential upside. But,
Adam, your career is as a numbers man. You're analysing numbers every day and making sense of them. Where the hell do these numbers come from? So now group bookings in a hotel, in a pub, can't be 20, they're now 10. Where does 20 come from? Where does 10 come from? Who makes these up? Where is the basis for allocating figures of that kind?
Well, I think it's 10 because it's a round figure and it's 20 because it's a round figure. There is absolutely no scientific basis for these figures. Indeed, late last year, the World Health Organization, before all of this hysteria, they released a paper, I think it was October, where they said that all of these restrictions basically have no scientific basis. But of course, that was all completely shunted aside in the mass hysteria, and now we've got all these, finicky restrictions. And if you're the ordinary man in the street, you have no idea what's going on because they seem to change every few weeks.
None.
And so how does anyone have a clue?
None. And look, I'm not blaming the police here because they're only doing their job.
I'm not either. I agree.
No. But we've got police entering restaurants with guns on both sides of them in numbers, and people think, my God, is this a drug raid? What's going on here? And they're counting. How many people have you got here? How many people?
Extraordinary.
It is unbelievable.
The police would be embarrassed.
Eh?
That's right. The police would be embarrassed. They'd certainly be embarrassed because it is embarrassing because, they observe the world around them and they see how stupid it is. I mean, never in history have you got the vast bulk of population, being asked to cower from something that is basically of negligible threat to them.
Absolutely.
It is just extraordinary.
Just let me ask you about this Griffith University Professor of Economics, Tony Macon, who said today that government spending should stop, that increasing Queensland and federal government debt was a problem and the economy was on life support. and staggering, but I mean truthfully, he said, Queensland's total government debt was headed for more than $100 billion, and the federal government would have, quote, well over $1 trillion in public debt. He said, I think the economy is effectively on life support. It's not really stimulus in the dictionary sense of the word. How do you argue with that?
Well, look, I think Tony Makin's very sensible. He makes some excellent points. I mean, the reality, though, at the moment is there's no spike in interest rates for government debt, and that's essentially because, you know, in the world of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, and I think Australia is kind of the one-eyed man at the moment because we just have a lot less debt than other major countries do. So we're, if you like, getting away with it. You know, the bigger problem, I think, for our economies now is more and more people are basically talking about giving government the printing press to print money to give to people. And I think this is the real worry. And I think if we're going to see a spike in interest rates, a spike in inflation, this will be the reason why in the next few years.
Absolutely.
But look, you know, pressure on the Queensland government, the federal government is going to be very much to spend money to stimulate. But as you said earlier, it is just kicking the can down the road.
That's a very good point that you just made. They think they can get away with it because interest rates are almost zero, so we'll just keep ploughing in the debt. Look, just before you go, did you note that an outfit calling themselves Millionaires for Humanity, did you see this? 80 of them have urged governments around the world to tax the super wealthy, whoever they are, immediately, substantially and permanently. Adam Creighton, who are the super wealthy? And governments don't need any invitation to tax, do they?
Well, look, the idea is that there's just it's all very well to say things like this, but in practice it's very hard to tax these people anyway. And look, this is just a massive distraction from far bigger problems now. We need to ease the restrictions and get the world economy back to normal, so we can cut income taxes on ordinary people. I just think this is just a waste of time thinking about this.
Yeah, I mean, no one in Canberra is prepared to tell us this story. I mean, the government and the opposition seem to be in lockstep, don't they?
Yes, because they're both terrified of being accused of, causing deaths. This is the problem. People need to speak the truth to the public here.
Good on you, Adam. There's a golden rule about all this, isn't there? You can't make the poor rich by making the rich poor.
It's very true.
You're a good man, Adam Creighton. Lovely to talk to you. Talk to you next week. Talk to you next week. There he is, Adam Creighton. I mean, how good is he? But, I mean, we've got to face that kind of reality, and it's something they're not prepared to tell us about.